Alarming sounds. Thunder cracks through the morning air. Nearby bushes rustle and wave as something makes its way through them. Too small for a human, too fast to be ignored. I hear low, muffled growling. Shivers run down my spine. What? Could this be a snork? Did the coming emission startle those hideous beasts out of their hideout?
Join the team.
Hey, theMCGuiRE Review, and today we're going to take a look at S.T.A.L.K.E.R, the board game from Awaken Realms. Again, we've already got one video out that goes over the unboxing. They did an amazing custom crate they created for the reviewers. Every one of them is different, so if you haven't seen that video, you can find it in the link in the description below and check out the unboxing. If you're not interested in the unboxing, we obviously have the game out of the box and on the table now if you don't want to see any of the other little extra bits and components they threw in for fun. This video is going to focus on what I hope helping you make a decision for the Gamefound campaign. So one of the most important things, right, when any of these games get funded or produced, whatever way it is that it gets to you, is deciding do you want to add it to the cart and hit that button of buy. And I like to make these videos that try to help with that. So the first thing we're going to do is a quick run through the components that are on the table.
No, we're not.
First thing that we're going to do is we're going to compare this game to a number of other games that are already out on the market. Now, you may not know all of these games. Maybe you do, maybe you don't. But if you do know these games, or you have played these games, or the style of these games, then that's going to help you understand if this is a game for you. I will say right off the bat, it isn't like this game is like, I've never seen anything like this. That's kind of hard to do in the board gaming landscape today. However, I think that this game does a very good job utilizing the mechanics that games like this have, and we're adding some new ways to do certain things, and we'll talk about that here in the game. So the first thing that I'll show is if you like a game like this game right here, Wolfenstein, where you're kind of stealthing around or moving around the castle and going for objectives and going for missions. This game has a feel like that. If you like a game like this game right here, Rambo the board game, now the reason why I use this title is because there's a lot of aspects of this game where you are stealthing around and using your environment to hide yourself or trick the enemy to be able to get to where you need to go and achieve your objectives. And you get a lot of that in this game. A little bit different than Wolfenstein, but you get a lot of that in this game. And finally, and from the same designers, This War of Mine, which is very, very similar from the perspective of the environment that you're in when you play the game. You could almost think of, if you have this game or you like this game, you're going to love this game because it's the same environment. And what this game does is it takes the piece of this game where you will leave kind of your encampment and you'll go on those missions where you get into combat and you get into roles and you get into things that could happen to you outside of your home base. That's kind of where this game really focuses on. The side of being back at camp or your home base is lighter in this game. It's much heavier in this game, right? So that's kind of the differences that you're going to see in these titles. These are different video games, different board games, but I use that as an example to kind of show the balance of what you're going to experience. What's nice about S.T.A.L.K.E.R is that it gives you the feel this game has back at the camp and back at home, in between these missions, and it gives you ways to kind of like track that stuff and build out NPCs and create custom squads or crews that go out with customized weapons and loadouts that will go out on these missions. And that's a really cool aspect of S.T.A.L.K.E.R, and that's why I use this game as well. It would be really cool to kind of play the whole This War of Mine and then play the whole game of S.T.A.L.K.E.R. That would be kind of an amazing experience that would give you sort of the same thing, but heavy on one side or the other. And that's really awesome. Okay, there's a number of other games I could probably use, but I use those three of my collection to say if you could take all the best aspects of those particular games and put them all together and pull them into a tactical miniature. I'll call this a tactical miniatures game because for the most part, that's primarily what you're going to be focusing on is what we have set up here, kind of the missions that you go on. That's what you're going to get in S.T.A.L.K.E.R, the board game. So I think that that's done really well. So that's the first thing that you'll really want to think through in buying this game, because if none of these games I showed, or none of the things I've been talking about, like you got miniatures, it's tactical, you're like going through combat, you're trying to strategize on where do I hide and can they see me, and if that's not a game for you, you're probably not going to enjoy this title. You really have to enjoy that type of gameplay and game style. If you just want more of like resource management, this really isn't a resource management type game. This is a tactical miniatures kind of combat-based game that they've weaved a lot of theme and campaign and story into to kind of build out further what you get here with this mechanic. And that's done really well, because a lot of games just sort of stop right here and they're missing that rich campaign and that make you feel like you're really building up through the story. They're missing that. Where Awaken Realms has done a nice job balancing both of those sides of gameplay in this one title. So really well done. Okay, so that's really the first thing you're going to want to think through. Now what we'll do is we'll kind of get into a high-level view of the components that are here and the reason why these components exist. We won't spend an enormous amount of time here, but it is important, and I know you've probably seen videos where folks go through like a how to play and they hit some of the items, but I really want to make sure people understand exactly why they're here and why they're important versus just being like another token that you have to do something with in the game. All right, so we'll start right here at the player boards. They do include these nice boards, and again, this is all prototype stuff. It's all going to be made even better than what you see here on the table, which you can see by the side-by-side cam, it's pretty awesome already, but this is just a prototype version of this game. You've got your player boards. You will have a character. All the characters are different. You will have a weapon card. The weapons are different. They work different ways. Then you can do things where you're adding in these weapon, they call them weapon attachments. So you can actually customize your weapon with scopes or better grip or whatever, right? Like, that's really cool that you don't just get a specific item. You get an item, plus you can add these attachments on and customize it. You can do the same thing with armor. You get armor, you got an attachment for armor as well. The weapon has 2 attachments, armor has 1. Then you have 3 inventory or active inventory slots where things you can use whenever you want. And then you have an infinite amount of things that you can put in your backpack. And those are items you can use free actions to kind of swap things out, but or if you're full here and you pick up an item, you can kind of swap it out. But you can carry this backpack and you can put as much stuff as you want in the backpack, which is nice that they don't limit that. And then here at the bottom, you will take wounds. Every wound that you get, there is a deck over here of wounds, and when you draw these wounds, they either have physical wounds, which will be the red at the bottom, or they have radiation wounding, which will be the green. You'll just flip it around to whatever type of wound you're experiencing, and you will have to, go through, let's just say, stress and pain and whatnot by having these wounds. So you will have to endure some of this stuff, like physical bleeding at the end of a turn. You roll the wound die, gain a face-up wound if you hit an X, gain a face-down wound if you hit a little slash there. So there's ways to what they call dress your wounds and kind of heal them. They still count to your total. They just don't affect you at the end of the round generally anymore. If you do get a 4th wound, that's not so good. You have to roll some dice, and if you get a skull, you're basically dead. So that's not so great. You don't want to get that 4th wound, or basically every single turn or round you have the potential of pretty much just dying in the campaign. Okay? So that's how the wounds work and the component that we have here. So I do like the way that they've utilized the wounds, and we've seen that mechanic or approach to wounds in prior Awaken Realms games as well. It's one of the things that I do like, and I'll mention this as well. Every time Awaken Realms makes another title or a game, it is clear they're learning from all their past games, and they do take aspects or components of other games and implement them in here. Okay, there's aspects of Aetherfields in here, there's aspects of Nemesis in here. You could say there's aspects of Tainted Grail from the scripts and the different answer this, go to this script, do this, do that. So there's all these different aspects of some of their great games that are embedded here to make this title really well, as well as the little binder and the folder that they did recently in their space-based game that they're coming out with. They did a Gamefound on. That one had kind of the binder, and we'll look at that here in a second. So that's your player board. Every player is going to have some actions. The actions are even going to be different for each player. They all have a long action and 2 short actions, but what those actions do can be a little bit different. So it's each player really plays completely differently. It's not like the players are sort of generic, and the only difference is maybe your loadout. The characters themselves are completely different. And that's really cool for these missions as well. We got ourselves set up for a 3-player game. The prototype came with 3 characters. The full game will come with more. There is a little radiation meter that each character will get, and you will set that. And as you take radiation damage, you'll just kind of turn that and just, keep turning up your radiation. And obviously, the higher you get, that's not going to be good for you. You're right. You're going to have to start to roll dice, potentially take wounds. It's not going to be great. All right. So that's pretty much the player board. There are, various different item cards and character cards and weapon cards, and those are laid out across the table, and those just slot right in your character board here. It does give you a really nice little presentation as you're playing as a character or as a player. You have these dice, red and blue dice. You'll roll those depending on when the game needs to roll those. Primarily, you're going to be rolling these when you're defending and attacking models. You have these little red cubes, which will track ammo. So your weapons will take ammo, and your weapons will only have a specific set amount of ammo, which is another thing that I like in this game. It isn't like you have an unlimited clip or 1,000,000 shotgun shells. You only have 2, 3, 4, whatever the weapon card specifies over here. Weapon card specifies that you have. Now you can find more and pick up more, but you only have a set amount, which I like. So you have to be smart about when you want to actually discharge that weapon when you're actually going on your mission, because otherwise you're going to run out of ammo, and when you need it, you're not going to have it. There are noise tokens. There are noise tokens that are yellow and noise tokens that are red. The yellow are worth a point of 1. The red are worth a point of 2. Now, one of the first mechanics in this game that I think is done really, really well is how they utilize noise. When you move around the board as a player, so if I was to move through these spaces, and again, we're not going to get into gameplay in this video. We're going to talk about the mechanics, and we're going to talk about why this game is cool and why you might want to buy it. The next video or 2, we might do 2 more videos, we're going to get into actually playing the game. We'll turn the lights up a little bit brighter, get right on the table, and we'll play the game and have a lot of fun going through, like playing the game. But as you're moving through these spots on the board, every spot you move is going to leave a noise sound. So if you moved 3 spots, at the spot you end your movement, you're going to put 3 of these little noise tokens. You're always making noise no matter what you're doing. And that noise is going to attract the enemies that are positioned around the board when it's their turn. If you're ever sighted by an enemy, or they call it spotted, if you cross basically a line of sight of an enemy, then what will happen is you'll end up getting one of these red tokens as well. So it's almost like they kind of like, hey, what was that? They kind of like saw you run by. So not only are you going to get the basic sound, you're going to get one of these too, which just ensures that when it's their turn, they're going to be more interested in maybe coming over towards your direction because you're going to have more sound. And how that will work is, wherever they are, however far away they are, how many ever spaces they are, if that ever equals or is less than the amount of sound that is there on that spot, like you're attracting them. So if you have like 2 reds and 2 of these, that'd be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 sound, and they're 4 spots away. Well, you have enough sound to definitely drag them in. So they'll move their full movement, and that's specified right there on their card. Otherwise, if there's not enough sound to draw them, they'll just patrol, which means they'll only move 1 space, and then you'll roll a die here, and it will say which way they're faced. And that's where we'll go next. Is facing and positioning is very important in this game as well. They did utilize some really good miniatures combat type mechanics. It isn't just simply the model's there and it just moves random every time, or whichever way it's faced is the way that it will move, and then as it moves towards sound, it will turn. And that's important when it comes into line of sight and range with these enemies, is they only have line of sight and range directly in front of them and out to either side, not behind them. A stalker, or a character in the game, can take range and see line of sight 360 all the way around them. Okay? So that's how the differences there with that works. So what that mechanic provides is the ability for you to be smart within your movements and try to stay back behind the enemies so they're not seeing you, and you don't have that direct line of sight where they'll get an attack. If you do ever cross into their line of sight and their range, and you stop somewhere that is in their line of sight or range, and they have one of these little red tokens right here, which is a pile right here. These are called Overwatch tokens. You'll put these on and off the board every round. They get a free attack. They basically can just attack you. You don't want to do that because they're going to have a phase after your player phase where they're going to get to move around and attack, and they may attack you during that phase. You don't want to give them extra opportunities to be able to do that. And that's what these little Overwatch tokens do and why they're there. And I like that as well because sometimes games are designed where they only get to attack in their phase and you're attacking in you're attacking and doing your thing in your phase, and the enemies only get to attack in their phase. I like the design where the enemies are going to get a phase to attack and move, but if you do something sloppy in your phase, they're going to get to double down. Okay, line of sight works a little bit differently in this title than what I've seen done in a lot of other games. It's a very interesting mechanic the way it works, where you kind of draw these lines going, either horizontal or vertically from the person. And whenever you sort of run into a barrier or a blocker, it's easier to see those here, and that's why I've chose to use the 3D terrain for this video. We'll talk more about this here in a little bit. Otherwise, there's little yellow lines that are physically printed on the board. You don't necessarily need this at all to play the game. Once you kind of hit one of those little lines, then you would say, oh, I can't go any further there, but oh, hang on, there's not a yellow line here, so I can kind of keep going. It makes it very, very easy to see line of sight when the 3D terrain is on the board. It's a little bit easier than what it would be maybe if the terrain wasn't there. But it's a very simple mechanic and system once you understand it. And it is different than what I've seen in some other games, but I do think it actually works pretty well. Like, I haven't been able to find a situation where it's like, okay, this says that the model doesn't have line of sight at all, but you can clearly see that if you were standing there, you would definitely be able to see this other character. I haven't really run into that yet, so I think the model or the design here with the line of sight actually works really well. It's very cool. You're not drawing line of sight diagonally. You're not doing any of that. It's all straight directions off of the model, and per the rules of not running into these barriers or walls. Little other models there don't block line of sight. Things like this. They included like these little barrels and different. There's some models that have like little piles of junk. That's just obstacles. None of it blocks line of sight. Only the yellow markers block line of sight, which represent the walls and the buildings here. Okay, that's how line of sight's going to work. And this is how we're going to do this, right? Like I'll kind of give a little bit of mechanic and rules, and then I'll weave it into why the component exists, right? So that kind of covers everything here. There are some tokens that represent things or actions that will happen over the course of the game. Your gun might jam. You throw a smoke grenade, and now you can't see in a certain area of the board. Different things like that. You'll find there's also things called pinning down. These models can be, and characters as well, can become pinned down. We've also got some loot tokens here. And these loot tokens will represent, I've got a few of them out on the board, probably going to be hard to see right now, but I got a few of them out on the board. And these loot tokens will represent just that. There'll be little caches of loot. Once you get to them, then you can draw a loot card, an item card here, and then you can get items. The other thing that we'll have are these little unknown tokens. They are also positioned around the board. They also will flip over when you come into that area, or a certain amount of noise is of distance from them, same as an enemy will work. Noise will draw an enemy. If a certain number of noise that's from however far it is, it will cause these to flip as well. And they basically will just add more enemies, different. It will specify there the type of enemy and what is added. Some of them do that, not all of them do. Some of them just say a 0 and they do nothing. And then some of them actually add more enemies. So you got to be careful where you make noise with those as well. There's also going to be cards that you're going to put on the board, and you won't be able to see those right now because the terrain's kind of sitting on top of them, that are called environment cards. And they will further customize and modify the base board. They're just a card that has a printing on it that has the same printing as the base board, so when you lay it down, you can't really tell it's there. But then when you flip it over, there's something special that happens. And it's generally things like, if you go into a building, like this one here in this building says, peek inside, and you can do this for a free action. It says, reveal this card. When you enter this building, reveal this card. So if you peek in through like a window, you peek inside, you got to reveal the card. If you walk in the building, you got to reveal the card. Okay? And that's how that's going to work. You would also reveal this token, which then you might have an issue there that you'd have to deal with. If you just peek in, you're not going to have to reveal that token. If you physically walk into this building, you'd have to reveal that token. That would be a problem. And then we've got a number of other cards here. We've gone through pretty much all of them except for the artifact cards that we have right here. This is where this part of the game, kind of this post-apocalyptic part of this game kind of goes sort of into the ether, right, where there's otherworldly things that are happening in this environment and slipping through the dimensions. That's where you're going to get some of these like mutants and monsters that are in the game right now. These are just kind of standard guards that you're fighting in this mission, and that's going to all happen over here with this anomaly, where when you go into these areas, you're going to interact with kind of the otherworldly type stuff, and you're going to draw some tokens. Those tokens are going to tell you exactly what's going to happen. It's going to be printed right here on this card. You're going to flip a card that's going to give you a little bit more information. And those anomalies can help you sometimes, or they can hurt you, and they can be triggered either by the players or enemies. So one of the tactics in this game, because you don't know what that anomaly is going to do until you flip the card, it's a secret when you go into your mission, is to try to trick enemies to sort of move that way and get them to enter the area to trigger it, and then you can see what it does, and then you can decide as a player, is that something that you actually want to interact with or not? Because again, there could be things that benefit you there. You're able to get very powerful artifacts only by going to these areas of the anomalies, and you'll need those artifacts as you play the game. So that's why that's there. There is a little compass that's included here, a little compass tile, gives you the directions that you have of the map. That's important as you go through and you activate things. You always do kind of this northwest. You start there and then you kind of go down through the board when you activate the enemies in the enemy phase. So that's why that's included. The other thing that I'll say from like a gameplay perspective, so now we'll kind of shift into that, is this kind of stuff right here where Awaken Realms does a very, very good job with like these little reference cards that has the game round order on it. And then what really happens when you get to that fourth wound? Because that fourth wound is like an extra set of rules, so you're not going back to the book and needing to look it up. What are all the icons that you'll see on the board and exactly what they mean, what you need to do? It's right on this little card. You're not digging through the rule book over and over and over again. You've got your enemy turn and the AI that they go through printed right here on this card. So you don't have to remember, oh, hang on, it was in range, but then it wasn't, and then I moved, and then is it in range now? Did they get an attack? And then you're back to the book right here. You just go right through the flow chart. It's as easy as it can be. By the second round, you won't even be looking at this. You'll just be going right through each enemy activation and what they need to do. There is a little bit more to this game when it comes to that. It isn't just like, hey, enemy phase. Can anybody see anybody? No. Okay, back to the players. No. The enemies are going to do something every time it's their turn. They're going to move their one. They're going to roll the die, figure out which way they're facing. North, south, east, west. They're going to check again for line of sight and range. If they have it, they then can attack. If they don't, then they can't. Then they get their Overwatch token back. Like, you got to go through this process for each one of the enemies that are on the board. And it does kind of speed up after you go kind of 1 to 2 rounds and you understand what you need to do. It is a pretty quick, okay, no line of sight, move forward, wherever they're facing, boop, roll the die, give them their Overwatch next, right? And you just kind of, you go pretty quickly through after you figure it out. It's not a problem. But the point that I'm making is Awaken Realms always does this and does this well. They print on the boards what you need to know that's important. They give you the cards that make the rule sets easy. They give you the little book, the little campaign book, or well, this game has a little campaign book that you read through, and while you're reading through the campaign book and learning new rules, or it's telling you to do things, it's reminding you at the end. It's like you get to the page, end of turn, resolve these, remove all sound and blank from one space. It just tells you what you should do, printed right here, and that's smart, because it eliminates the frustration of a lot of these games where there's so many things you have to do from phase to phase to phase. You're constantly going back to the rule book and saying, what did we do? Everything? What do we need to do again? It's all spelled out on everything that's in front of you. Then when you play the game, it's extremely intuitive, and it just gives you a better experience so you can focus on the game and not all these rules that are going on. So Awaken Realms does a very, very good job in this. And then the game feels simple, even if it does have a number of different rules and a number of different things you need to remember. Which, for me, this is a fairly light rule-based game. But, for some people, it might be a heavier rule-based game. And you're still going to be okay because you have these components like this that are just stepping you through right in the phase that you need to be in, round to round to round to round, right? So, awesome. Very well done from a design perspective there. Okay? The only other thing that I'll mention component-wise, I'm pretty much hit everything. There are a couple little cards here that dictate how these tokens work, and there is a little card here that gives you like a mission. Every mission you play, you've got like a 2, 3, 4, I don't know how many, I haven't seen them all, but there's a number of things that you have to do to be able to accomplish the mission. And every mission comes in its own little, for the prototype, I assume the production would be like this, its own little custom box. So you open that box up at the beginning and you're going to get specific weapons and different item cards. You're going to get your characters for that mission. You're going to get, I'll show this, you're going to get these little stickers that you'll be able to put on your world map as you go on adventures. You have this little world map, and you can put these little stickers on there to say you've kind of accomplished that area, or maybe you unlock other areas you're able to go to that, have various different shops or NPCs that you can interact with in between missions. That's kind of that campaign piece. It's going to have this piece of paper here that shows you how to set up the whole entire mission, that whichever one you're playing, right? And then, again, I didn't show this, but this is your little binder here that you're going to be able to build out as you play the game. Like, you've got your custom crew that you can build out and save your cards and your loadouts. You've got the stash, so all your little items and things you've acquired over the course of play. And then you've got kind of back home at the village, the NPCs you've interacted with and what those NPCs can allow you to do. And there are some scripts that are back here as well that will be utilized when you play the game. Right? So that's what you're going to find here in each one of these. So every one of them is like a contained little mission inside of this box. So the prototype came with a whole first one mission, which is, it's actually quite a few cards that are here that I have to go through and play. And then you get a whole nother mission 2 box. It's called the Fray in the Fridge, which is part of, it's called mission 0102. So it's a second mission of like the first chapter of the campaign. Okay, so that's what you're going to get in the prototype. That's what came here in the prototype. All right, the last thing we're going to hit, because that's all of kind of the components and the different gameplay styles I think you're going to get from this game. Now we're going to hit the miniatures. So it's Awaken Realms. The miniatures are phenomenal. Really well done with the anomalies here, how they kind of went about those. I hope they keep them that way for the final production as well, where they're clear and they're just kind of ghosted with a different color. That's really cool. I would like to see them maybe done in different colors. That might look kind of cool and be a little bit more unique when you got a different colored one on the board, depending on which one's on the board. I like the fact that they actually have the little terrain pieces as well, not just miniatures, but the terrain pieces that go on the board. That's nice. The models are awesome. The character models, the enemy models, they're phenomenal. It's Awaken Realms. sculpts. If you've got an Awaken Realms game, you know what I'm talking about. The sculpts are off the charts. They're awesome. Okay, these are all kind of what they call sun-dropped, I guess. So they do have that little painting that's on them. So if you're going to paint your game, you probably wouldn't want to get it this way. If you're not going to paint your game, you would. I'm not sure. I'd have to look at the page to see the draft page to see if they're going to. I'm assuming they'll offer something like this. I'm not sure. I have to check the page. Obviously, you could check the page. You're probably on the page now watching this video, and you can go to the link in the description below and go right to the Gamefound draft page, and you'll be able to check out everything they've got out there so far. Okay? Now, one thing that I will say about this terrain that has been awesome and not so awesome. A lot of videos that are out aren't even using this terrain, and I think the reason is because there's some pros and cons to this. The pro side is the terrain, the three-dimensional terrain definitely adds a awesome thematic feel. There is a feel that you get with playing this game with having this three-dimensional terrain that you do not get when it is not here. When you play it like this, it does feel sneakier, it does feel more intense. Line of sight is a lot easier to determine and see based on the walls and the buildings that are here. And I love board games that use three-dimensional terrain. So that's all awesome, and I love that piece of it. What I'm a little bit sad to say is the terrain, how it's implemented and how this game works with all the other mechanics is a little bit distracting to play the game, and it can actually hinder some things sometimes. It's sometimes hard to be able to see if there's an eyeball printed on this board. Wherever there are doors or windows, there's generally a little eyeball that's printed on there. It means you can enter that area or you can see through that area. Okay? So there may be line of sight sometimes where you can, like, you're standing here and you can see through a window, and maybe you can see someone standing inside and you can still get a shot. Sometimes this terrain blocks that eye. Sometimes the terrain has little windows and little spots that look like you would be able to see through them, but they're not. So depending on where you're sitting around the table, that can be a hindrance, and you could make a move and be like, oh, I thought I could see through that window. No, that's not one of the windows you can see through. And you couldn't see it because the terrain was in the way. So then what are you doing? You're constantly like grabbing the terrain, picking up the terrain, looking, putting the terrain back. Like you're constantly messing with it. That could be a problem. The thing is, the terrain is not necessary at all to play the game. It is absolutely an add-on extra cosmetic thing. It is not required. All the yellow lines are printed right on the board, and you can see where the blocking lines are and the buildings are, and you can clearly see all the white spaces in the cards and everything when the terrain's not there. And some may like to just play like that because it's just easier. Or if it doesn't bother you to be messing with the terrain and moving it around and messing with it and picking it up, putting it back down, then use the terrain. I don't know. When I play the game, when the production version comes out, even the prototype, I still just play with the terrain. I pick it up. Because you're going to have to pick it up every time you want to interact with a token, depending on how big your hands are to be able to get in there. You're going to have to pick it up every time you want to flip over one of those cards and then put it back down. So it is a lot of picking up the terrain, fiddling with things, and putting the terrain back. That's not going to work for some people, and some people are just going to be like, forget it, right? Just keep the terrain in the box, and the terrain might be an add-on. I'm not sure how exactly they're going to do the terrain, but some people may say just keep it in the box, and I'm just going to, after you play 4 or 5 games, okay, whatever, we've had the fun of the terrain, it's easier and quicker to kind of go through that way. Now, from a product design perspective, I do think there's ways to improve some of that. On these terrain pieces, at the tops of each window and door, I would print a little white eyeball symbol. Maybe ghost it out so it's not so blaring, right, as it is on the main board. But wow, would that make that part? And that's, for me, that's the most like, is that an eyeball spot? Like, that would make it easy, because then it doesn't matter where you're sitting around the table. You just look across the top, and you would see the little eyeball symbols printed over the tops of doors and windows where there actually is line of sight and that you can peek and move into. And that would solve that whole entire problem with that one little product design change. Then you'd be able to clearly be able to see everything from the very top of that terrain. Problem solved. And then I probably wouldn't even have that much of an issue with it, because you can pretty much see into the buildings and see what's written on the cards. And worst case, you just kind of stand up a little bit, and then you can see exactly what's written on them. Okay, so that's what I'll say about the terrain. Some games, the terrain doesn't matter at all because it never moves, it never blocks anything. There's cards that are not under it. It's not a hindrance at all. It just stays on the board. But with this particular title, the terrain is interacting with the components of the board. So now you do have kind of a pro and a con to that three-dimensional terrain. All right, I've exhausted myself with the terrain, but I really wanted to go on that one because I love board games that come with this three-dimensional terrain. But I just found on this one, there is a definite drawback here at this prototype phase. I think there are things they can do to really tweak it out to make it work. So I'm excited to see kind of what they do with the final production version of this. Okay, team, and that is STALKER, the board game. Hopefully what we've gone over today is going to help you be able to know if you want to back and fund this game on Gamefound. I think the price point they're actually putting on this is really good, and you pretty much always get your value out of these Awaken Realms titles because they generally pack them out. They're usually bigger campaigns, and they do pack them out with a number of little unlockables and things that really increase and enhance the base game. So I'm excited to see what they're going to unlock over the course of the campaign and what we're going to be able to get. But I think the price point is actually really good on this game for the components and the gameplay and the experience that you're going to get in this title. I am definitely biased because I loved the video game that this is based on. So there's some nostalgia there for me. But I think if you know nothing about the video game, this is going to be an excellent tactics, campaign experience, story-driven game that you're going to want in your collection and you're going to have a really good time with. So with that, team, keep rolling them crits. This has been the McGuire Review, and we'll see you next time.